but we'll backtrack a little bit. And now we are joined by Justin Rowland. He is the publisher at CatsIllustrated.com for Kentucky football and basketball. Also covers the recruiting trail for rivals. So, Justin, I really appreciate you hopping on with us today to talk a little bit of Coach Cohen.
You got it. Thanks for having me on.
I reached out to you last night in the midst of kind of all of the crazy before the official news came out that he was planning to take the Jags job, but there was just a lot of back and forth on Twitter between Bucs fans and Jags fans and just the national media of what is going on in Jacksonville right now. And in that, I was seeing several comments of Kentucky Wildcat fans also kind of mixed into some of these posts, and several of them making the comments about Liam Coen and kind of the back and forth he had between Kentucky and the Rams when he was there and there and there, and kind of a back and forth. And that has been one of the knocks on him that a lot of people have, if they've said anything negative, it's been in that light. Now, these Kentucky fans, Justin, not so much had been criticizing Liam Coen for it, but more so just saying we're not really surprised because that's kind of a track record there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that to kick this off. Tell us a little bit about how Kentucky fans and media had felt when he was going back and forth and what you guys believe led to those decisions.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is a relevant topic. Has been a pattern in the very early first part of his career. One thing I would say is, the guy he's been on an elevator for the last 4 or 5 years on a level that you rarely see. He was the assistant quarterbacks coach for the Rams. He becomes an SEC offensive coordinator. He becomes an NFL offensive coordinator. Doesn't work out, comes back to the SEC, and now he's an NFL head coach. So it's been a meteoric rise for him. And there have probably been moments when things dragged out longer than he might have wanted it to, or maybe he was a little bit more indecisive. But he's making huge life decisions, life changes, and each one of these decisions has been very difficult. As far as going back to Kentucky, you're talking about leaving the NFL and going back to recruiting and portal in college, which nobody really enjoys. And it's not especially easy being an offensive coordinator for a Mark Stoops football team. Others haven't had a lot of success in that role. So there's been a lot to think about. This gave him a lot to think about, apparently. But, yeah, the indecisiveness in the offseason is something that's followed him a little bit.
Justin, I read that in his first interview with Mark Stoops, he brought a video that had 300 offensive plays to show Stoops and kind of go through what he thought would work with the Wildcats. Is that the type of guy I feel like that is leading to this meteoric rise? Is the extra prepared and certainly a brilliant offensive mind?
He's a brilliant offensive mind. There's no doubt about that. In terms of understanding the nuances of modern offense and how to attack modern defenses, you never feel like he's a step behind the defensive coordinator in the other box or on the other sideline. You feel like he's always a step ahead. And I certainly hadn't seen that level of keep you on your toes ability from a Kentucky offensive coach in a very long time, maybe even go back to Mike Leach and Hal Money almost 30 years ago when they brought the air raid to Kentucky. But he communicates it well. He's a young guy who rolls up his sleeves. He has as much energy at practice as a lot of the players out there. And if you're down or if you're not, you don't have that energy, he's going to make sure you get there. He's a guy that people respect. People want to be around. Good, talented people want to be around him. He's a big reason they were able to bring in Wan'Dale Robinson from Nebraska. He had been kind of a running back, an all-purpose player, and Cohen sold him on being a receiver in a Kentucky offense where Kentucky hadn't had any success passing the ball. So he is very prepared, he communicates very well, and he's really smart on the football side.
Justin Rowland up in Lexington is our guest. You can find him on X at Rowland. That's ROWLAND, Rivals. We appreciate him joining us and all the work he does at CatsIllustrated.com. I'm going to fit a Kentucky basketball question in at some point, Justin, because as our resident AP voter, I have no choice. And also I am obsessed with Mark Pope. And so we'll get to that here in just a second. I know Taylor already kind of asked you this question, but just to really hammer the point home, I have had, for the better part of the last 3-4 months, as we kind of knew where things were going with Doug Peterson, I embarked on learning more behind the scenes about each of the potential candidates that the Jaguars may target. And in doing so, the rave reviews about Liam Coen were across the board from everyone I spoke with. But I think what's important to note is for 4 months, Justin, I've been told he went to Kentucky the first time because he wanted to call plays. He went back because who passes up an NFL OC opportunity? And then he went back to Kentucky because he wanted to call plays again, and he and Sean McVay agreed that was the best thing for his career. Now, for whatever the reason, in the last 24 hours, I've got people coming to me, and they're like, that's not true. Sean tried to fire him, and I don't believe that to be true, because in my heart of hearts and what I've been told by sources I believe over the last 4 months is that it was entirely Liam's decision because it actually set him up to continue on that elevator that you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, that wasn't a huge issue at the time that I recall. That year with the Rams, where he was the offensive coordinator, he made for a very convenient scapegoat. They couldn't block, and that was a huge part of the issue. Nobody's going to look great when you block the way that Rams team blocked. And so whether they thought it was best for the Rams if he moved on, or if it was just the right time for him to step away, I don't know. Kentucky may have been he's got a very unique resume. On the one hand, he's obviously very coveted by smart football people, but he doesn't have the background or the resume that would align with that. So Mark Stoops had some really good information plucking him from the Rams. They had a former staff member, Jonathan Cooley, there as an assistant staff member for the Rams. They knew a couple other people, and they just trusted the word on this guy before his name got really big. But I would be surprised, based on what I know about the relationship between McVay and Cohen, if there was any kind of animosity there or anything less than total respect. I know at the time there was some talk that McVay might have been stepping away in the near future, and that was a role. Right. And the timing of him coming back to Kentucky and leaving Kentucky, the timing really has been inconvenient for Kentucky. But this is about him and why they're paying him the big bucks. And so I would imagine it was just the fans and everybody weren't thrilled to bring back an offensive coordinator when the offense didn't succeed. But smart football people and Mark Stoops knew that Cohen wasn't the problem there.
Justin, let's go back to that 2021 season. Liam Coen being a big part of us seeing Will Levis getting drafted 33rd overall. And I do think we were just talking to somebody else about what's been kind of the change for the Buffalo Bills offense this season. And we've talked about the Bucs offense with Liam Coen, and a big part of that has been the run game. And that was a part of that Wildcat team in 2021 too, with Chris Rodriguez Jr. and what he was able to do. They had more than half of their games had over 100 rushing yards with him. And so what would you say is the MO of Liam Cohen's offense, and just the importance of him being able to help develop a guy like Will Levis, and how that may transfer over to helping out Trevor Lawrence?
There's going to be a lot of motion. There's a lot of eye candy before the snap. And he's really good at creating and finding mismatches all over the field. I'll take you to the 2021 game against Georgia. That Georgia team won the national championship, but Kentucky played them about as well as any team did that year. It was a completely dominant Georgia team, and Kentucky lost about 31-13, but they were committed to getting Wan'Dale Robinson the ball. He probably was targeted close to 20 times in that game, because Cohen knew this is the one guy we have that can put strain on that Georgia defense. And they didn't win, but you felt like they had a plan. You felt like they had a plan against a very talented LSU team later in the season. He's a guy that the game plan might be very different 1 week to the next, but he's all about building and tweaking that offense around the personnel that he has. He is going to want to run the ball. That's coming from the Rams and McVay. Mark Stoops would not hire an offensive coordinator that's not committed to being able to run the ball when you've got a 7-point, a 10-point lead. And so Cohen was aligned with that, so he was attracted to him. But in terms of just scheming in the red zone, creating matchups, creating favorable sides of the field, he's fantastic. The football smarts really come across in situations with him.
Justin, I think the only thing that's really making Jags fans nervous is the reason that all the Bucs fans are upset right now, and that is a little bit of maybe treating this situation a little differently than people would have expected him to, and as far as not telling the Bucs that he was going to take this second interview with the Jaguars brass. Do you think, you alluded to some maybe indecisiveness that Liam has had throughout his career. Do you think that that's something he maybe struggles with a little bit?
Maybe a little bit. He's a young guy who I think is figuring it out all on his own. And he's had some very distinct choices. I mean, NFL offensive coordinator, SEC offensive coordinator, do I play call in one spot but have less control in another spot? NFL offensive coordinator, head coach. I mean, he has had some difficult decisions, but Yeah, he sure should have communicated that other interview was taking place. I know he's tended to go really quiet. He's not a guy out there, in my experience, that's hitting up reporters and leaking things left and right. I mean, he kind of gets in his shell and he lets the conversation rage. And so on the outside, you're wondering what's happening with Cohen, what's going on behind the scenes. And he may be talking, but he's not feeding a lot of stuff to reporters. He's not the source of a lot of that stuff. So I think he certainly could have handled it better, but he's also not the one stirring it up behind the scenes.
Which, hey, in the words of Urban Meyer, you don't want to leak around the building. So that's not
right.
That sounds like a good plan to me. I promise.
He's a pro. He's a professional in how he carries himself.
And you're not the first person to tell me that, Justin, and I appreciate that insight because that's what I've been told for 4 months. Like I said, it's been in the last 24 to 48 hours that the haters have come through, and I've just kind of been like, that's convenient to come as now all of a sudden we're on the doorstep of him becoming the next Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. I